All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. Today we have a guest from the US. They're out of the greater Baltimore, DC area, I think closer to DC there,
Mhm.
Rachel Coll. So thank you very much, Rachel Coll. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and we can get started. Thanks again for joining.
Yeah, of course. I'm so happy to be here, and I hope you're all well, and looking forward to learning a little bit about your brain and relationships and how the two interact. So I was an attorney for a long time. I practiced law about 10 years and came to DC just to go to law school, although my family moved here when I was in college. And I started law school in 2004, graduated in 2007. I went to Catholic University, for any of you that are familiar. And I just really was one of those lawyers. I left the legal profession really loving the law, actually. I just really enjoyed the constant, different perspective options that were available, that there was always a side to every case and always the ability to see things in a different light. And I just thought that was so cool. And it was like math only with words, and I just loved it. So I was really excited to dive into legal practice when I graduated law school. And so I clerked for a judge actually my first year out of law school, because I worked with this judge in a trial practice class in law school and just found him to be so inspiring. Actually, in trial practice class, he said to me, has anyone ever told you, we were doing a mock trial, and I asked a question and got an answer from the witness. And he said, do you realize that you have a habit of saying okay after every answer that a witness gives you on direct examination? And I was like, oh, I didn't notice that. He's like, it's kind of annoying. Try to stop. And I loved how honest that feedback was. I've always been somebody who really valued like constructive criticism over positive feedback. I always felt like positive feedback was kind of superfluous and unnecessary and didn't really give me anything to work on. And it always kind of, for reasons that, ultimately brought me to coaching, made me uncomfortable, because I was like, oh, they're just saying that to be nice. But constructive criticism to me felt really useful. So I really just wanted to work for this judge, and I did. So I clerked for him after my first year of law school, and then ultimately became a prosecutor in the jurisdiction where I clerked for him. I was in the state's attorney's office, which is what they call the DA in Maryland, which is where I'm licensed to practice law. I'm licensed in Maryland and DC. And I just absolutely loved it. I loved prosecuting the most minor of cases. I loved ultimately moving up to felony cases later in Baltimore City, where I handled rape and domestic violence cases. And I just, as hard as those cases can be and as emotionally draining as they can be, I loved connecting with people from a different walk of life, from a different personal experience, and really learning very quickly, very personal details about them, having them confide in me and trust me, and really try to sort of problem solve with them, right? It was like the adventure of getting them justice when it felt like there could be no justice after what happened to them. So I really loved that element of practicing law. And I think that was where I first realized that I liked sort of sitting with people and having them confide in me and tell me, how I could make their experience better. And so that sort of parallel to my personal life, where I kind of felt like I was someone who had always been in relationships and had always dated basically pretty consistently since high school. And I graduated law school in 2007, so you can do the math, but I've been dating for a long time. And it never felt like it was that bad, but it never felt like it was working, right? It just always kind of felt like my personal life did not match my professional life. Like I was always able to land on my feet, figure it out, ask the right questions, get the right information, find the right case, make the right argument. I could always figure it out at work. And in relationships, I felt like the complete opposite was true. Like there was some statute somewhere that I just didn't have a copy of, and I could not figure out how to get my love life right. And so actually in 2017, so not that long ago, actually, I started working with my own life coach while I was still practicing law. And really just felt like it was the change in perspective that I'd needed for so long. Because it really shifted mind from being one of like the confused victim, for lack of a better way of putting it, to aware and understanding and empowered with the right information to get what I wanted in both areas of my life. So I loved working with my coach. It changed basically everything about my life. And so in 2019, I decided to get certified as a life coach. And basically the rest is history. I stopped working full-time in December of 2019 and have been growing my one-on-one coaching practice since then.
So you say that would be the reason for the transition, because you were talking very glowingly about your time there, as a prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
Was that having that great experience yourself with a coach that kind of said, well, I want to do this, and got you certified, and now that's what you're doing completely with your time right now? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was, I got certified as a coach kind of because at the time I was working in elections law, which is seasonal, as you might imagine. It's like really, really busy when there's an election coming up and in the couple weeks after one, but then it's kind of quiet in non-election years. And so I had the time and I didn't really know what I was going to do with the certification when I started pursuing it, but I just knew I wanted to know more about coaching. And I wanted to not just know how to manage my own brain with my coach, but I also wanted to learn how to explain it to other people without drawing on my personal experience, right? Like instead of just saying, oh, well, here's what my coach said to me, so here's what I would say to you about your relationship. I wanted to actually understand the tools myself. And I started just coaching people part-time because it was fun. Honestly, like I just loved doing it. And it was only when the coaching practice, frankly, I mean, this is such a blessing. I feel like I'm so lucky to even talk about it this way, but it grew to the point where I felt like I had to make a choice to either cut down on my coaching clients and keep my full-time job, or leave the full-time job and keep trying to grow the coaching practice, which is ultimately what I decided to do.
And are you coaching mostly lawyers because of your background in law, or it's anyone that comes your way that wants your expertise?
I'll coach anyone that comes my way as long as they are really interested on working on themselves, right? I would say the most simple way of putting coaching and what brought me to it and why it appealed to me so much. And I told that anecdote with the judge for a reason, because I felt like I'd been in therapy on and off most of my adult life, trying to figure out relationship stuff. And I'm definitely painting with a broad brush here, and this is not a knock on therapy, but I happen to feel like therapists that I'd worked with had been very like on my side and sort of used things that happened in my past as explanations for why I showed up certain ways in relationships. And it felt very like warm and cuddly in the moment. It felt like I was understood and that there was a lot of compassion on the other side of the chair, the room, whatever. But I would then leave the appointment and feel kind of like, okay, well, what do I do now? Because I just kind of had this history, had this thing happen in my past, and I'm sort of stuck with it, and I can't change. I can't be different. And coaching really showed me my own accountability and responsibility, and not from a place of blaming myself, right? But back to that judge's constructive criticism, it was like empowering to feel like, oh, here's how I can get better. I don't need to change the past. I don't need to change other people. I can just work on me. So sorry about that. I can just work on me and grow and change and evolve. And that doesn't have to come with, somebody else participating or somebody else's buy-in, right? It can be just me. And so I think that was what made me just like fall in love with coaching. And so really it's like, if I'm being honest about who I'll coach, it's not just lawyers, it's not just non-lawyers, it's people who are willing to take accountability and responsibility for the things that have happened in their lives and take action from there, right? It's like, if you show up to me and you want to work on yourself because you see yourself as the common denominator in your life, then lawyer, non-lawyer, sales executive or hairstylist, whatever you do professionally, like I'm here to help you figure out what's going on with you so that you can create a different experience.
And is your coaching centered mostly around relationships? So, or it could be kind of any area in life that they're seeking some kind of perspective from?
It's mostly relationships, but I have to tell you, most of life is relationships, right? So it's like, whether it's your job or your health or your romantic partner or your friends or your family of origin or your kids, like, we're all talking about relationships, right? Even at work, it's like a series of relationships that we have with other people, that create our career and our experience at our jobs. So yeah, I mean, my clients and I work together for 6 months at a time. So in that 6 month period, as you can imagine, we're talking every week. We definitely touch on things outside of romantic relationships, but that's usually what brings people to my practice, just because that's what brought me to coaching. And that tends to be like the coach's area of coaching is what their clients want coaching on, if that makes sense. It's sort of that's what attracts them to me and what attracts me to them as clients. Um, so yeah, it is mostly romantic relationships, but for sure we talk about all things.
Now, in the legal profession, I think in particular, uh, it's a lot of hours, like a lot of. I mean, again, kind of very broadly or very generally, that people are tending to work. I mean, it's different for everyone. A lot of hours at work, and as a result, that creates maybe a lot less time available for maybe a romantic partner or for relationships. Plus, there's also that added stress of, if you're working as a prosecutor or a defense lawyer, or, at a big law firm in terms of corporate law. Uh, how do you find that impacts the relationships from maybe the other partner, not quite understanding the level of time commitment from the person from the legal field?
Yeah, I think lawyers and part of what I call jokingly with my clients, the lawyer brain feels very obligated to leave no stone unturned, be available at all hours of the day, and be, the best at what they do, right? And I'm not saying other professions aren't like that. I'm just saying that lawyers are that way for the most part. We're intense, we're competitive, if only with ourselves, right? And we are driven and incredibly motivated to stop at nothing for our clients. And so that often means, I mean, you only have so many hours in the day, and most of us need to sleep and eat and drive and do other things. So, when you are that available and committed to your job and really feeling like your clients or victims or witnesses or police officers, if you're a prosecutor, like your people that you're advocating for, are your world, they're your life. And so I think we tend as lawyers to really identify our worth and our value with our performance at work. And so when we are in relationships with other lawyers or not, I think it's common to sort of shift our focus away from the relationship and feel like we don't have time for it, right? Whether it's like time to show up and actually be present with the partner, or time to work on the relationship, or if you're single, time to be intentional about dating, right? So it's like we're all sort of drawn to other humans, and we all, I think, for the most part, want some kind of romantic partnership in our lives. Not everyone wants that, but certainly everyone that comes to me does. And to want that, but also feel like you don't have the time to be intentional about it. Like, we're going to date. And so then we often end up dating people that aren't right for us, or dating people because they just are around and available, and we try to make it work instead of being really conscious and focused on what it is that we're looking for and the kinds of partners that we are. And when we skip that step, we end up like sort of letting the relationships and life in general happen to us instead of taking charge and ownership of it. So I think definitely the theme is lawyers believing that they don't have time for their, for, Kevin just wrote single forever. I love that. But I think for most of us lawyers, we've been told or thought that we don't have time for that, and that we'll figure the relationship stuff out later. But there's no later in legal practice where it gets easier. I mean, you can find a less demanding job or a firm with lower billable requirements, but I hate to tell you, but I think the lawyer brain is really hardwired to like always want to be the straight A student. And yeah, so what I work on with my clients is really deciding consciously, even if it is uncomfortable and even if it means feeling guilty or like you're missing something or you're shortchanging your job to really be intentional about the relationship that you are looking for, because long term, it saves you time, right? Long term, when you're intentional about your partner and you're focused on your relationship, you are more focused at work. You are more present with your clients. You are more able to compartmentalize and leave home at home and leave work at work when you're with your partner, if you're like with somebody who's actually really compatible with you. So does that answer your question?
I think so, but how do you consciously make that decision? I guess I mean, I know for example, let's say you've committed to maybe lunch or going out for dinner, and somehow the phone call comes in from the office or from a client, and then everything stops, and one thing leads to another, and then your partner there's like, again, see, you're too busy for spending time with me, or for finding time for the relationship. So how do you make that conscious decision to ignore work, or is that something that's maybe easier said than done, and focus on the relationship, whatever the relationship might be?
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest tools that I work on with my clients, and certainly what I experienced with my coach, particularly in the first 6 months of working with her, is like being in the discomfort of decisions, right? Like deciding that there are certain things that we want in our lives. We want the full career, we want the relationship, we want kids, we want a house, we want relationships with our friends and family. We have the priorities, right? And however you rank them, we still may want all the things. We just might have the order shifted a little bit. And part of this work is really getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because we experience discomfort either way, right? When we're overworked and overwhelmed and giving 150% to our job and nothing to any other areas of our lives, like that is uncomfortable, right? So we know we can experience the emotions that come up when we're uncomfortable and survive them. And so this work is just like, okay, if you're going to be conscious about making the time for your partner and not spending that 7th or 8th hour on a Saturday doing casework, can you make that decision and experience truly the discomfort that initially pops up when you're like not doing the work that you think your brain is telling you you should be doing, right? And so it is a practice. It is a conscious practice and a conscious decision to be in the discomfort of choosing yourself over your work sometimes, so that you can cultivate a healthy relationship, because relationships don't grow out of thin air, right? They have to come from time spent and conversation and activities together and all the things that couples do. And if you don't make that time, there's really nothing to cultivate there, right? Nothing to work on. And so if that's something that you want, if you're not Kevin, who's seemingly decided to stay single forever, then if that's something that you want in your life, it does require sitting in the discomfort of saying, like, I'm going to not do work right now and deal with whatever comes when I don't focus on work 100% of the time and focus on myself sometimes.
Now, do you find lawyers finding partners with other lawyers? Does that help with that connection, because they may have a better understanding of that time demand, or is that make it even harder because now you have both partners that have all sorts of different obligations that makes it even harder to kind of coordinate that time for each other?
I don't think that's the actual algorithm, right? I appreciate the question, but I think it is all about how we approach our relationships. And if two lawyers are working well together and are compatible together, great. And if it takes one lawyer and one non-lawyer, but I mean, high stress jobs are everywhere, right? High demand work is everywhere. And so for all of us, I think we are constantly evaluating our priorities and making decisions in our lives based on what's most important. And so whether you're a surgeon or an attorney or a, contractor, whatever you do, like you can make that your life's work and your life's mission, right? It can be totally consuming. I see it in coaches, right? Like I coach a coach, and I also work with a lot of other coaches in my network. And some coaches do work all day, every day, 24/7, right? And it's like any profession can be ballooned into your entire life. And so I think whether your partner is another lawyer or another professional or even a business owner, right? It's like the proclivity for overworking is something that comes within us. It's not dependent on the profession. But I do think that two minds in the same profession may understand the sort of expectation, right, of legal practice. I think I never worked in big law, but I know that big law firms have hourly billable requirements for the year. And if that's just math again, too, it's like you've got to hit a certain number of hours. So you have to work a lot to hit those hours, right? Because not every hour is billable. So it's definitely a practice, I think, and requires understanding and compassion and communication. And that's true whether you're the only lawyer in the relationship or there's two of you.
So I was asking, what are some pieces of advice or tools that you find useful with certainly keeping yourself in terms of the relationship goals heading on the right track?
Yeah, I think it's giving ourselves permission to want what we want, right? Is the most simple way I would state it. A functioning relationship is one that doesn't distract or derail you from your career, right? It doesn't take you away. And I think when people caution you against focusing on your relationships or your romantic life when you are a law student or an early lawyer or even a not so early lawyer, it's because they are believing that relationships are problematic and stressful and dramatic and cause distraction and derail you from your work. But I think when we are clear about what we want, and what I work so much on with my clients is getting clear on not just the kind of partner that they're looking for, but also the kind of partner that they are, so that they, can really understand not just what they're looking for, but that they are offering so much as a partner themselves. It helps them believe that their match is out there, right? And I think it also helps them really honor and be deliberate and, again, intentional about what they're looking for, instead of just haphazardly dating, believing that relationships derail and we don't have time to focus on finding the right one. So the biggest challenge, I think, with my clients right now that I work on them with most consistently is just getting that clarity on what they want, not feeling like they have to justify what they want, and feeling like they can look for a partner who matches what they want and not settle for something that isn't less than what they deserve, but just isn't what they want, isn't what they are looking for. I think particularly lawyers can be so service driven and feel so obligated to other people and to take care and to justify and have good reasons, right? Like I felt that a lot in my relationships before I got coached, that I felt like, every argument, and I mostly dated non-lawyers, but almost every non-lawyer that I dated at some point in an argument was like, stop lawyering me, right? So I think that is something that we tend to do, where we justify and explain, and we try to prove our case, right, over and over again in our relationships. And I think, releasing some of that need to prove yourself or need to justify or explain or defend what you want and why, versus just saying, I want what I want, right? And that's okay. And I don't, maybe I have to justify and defend and explain myself at work or in court and when a judge asks or a jury asks. But in my personal life, I get to just want what I want. And as long as I feel like that's in integrity with me and I'm not wanting those things out of fear or insecurity, which totally comes up too, then it's like we just work on accepting what we want so that we can, again, date consciously with confidence and belief that the person that we're looking for really is out there.
Now, what are some of the issues that people who come to you needing coaching? Is it something like about the time? Do they have some anxiety, relationship anxiety, or is it just wanting someone to talk to and help guide them and get them back on track to what they're looking for?
Totally. So I've kind of got all breeds, right? I have a client who was navigating a divorce and is now separated from his wife and is moving towards his single life again at the middle of his life. I have brand new law students, people that are in their first and second year of law school, doing the work on, dating intentionally and being single in a way that feels like they're both prioritizing law school, but also maintaining a personal life and focusing on the romantic piece that they also want to. I have clients in relationships that are navigating, low levels of dissatisfaction and stuff like that. I have clients who are single and in their 30s and early 40s, really, really trying to find their right fit. So it's kind of every and anything that you can imagine. But I would say the one thing they all have in common is the desire for that right fit and that relationship that just feels like it really matches them and what they're looking for. So whether they're single or moving through a divorce or a breakup or in a relationship that's feeling stressful for whatever reason, you're my people. That's who I work with.
So maybe we were talking about something about people who are single, right? And how do maybe looking for that encouragement of kind of getting back, maybe they're coming off a relationship that just broke down, and to kind of help them make that conscientious step, like you were saying, to get back into the dating pool there. What is it that kind of creates that apprehension and how they can overcome that apprehension?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think a lot of people, I was just coaching a client on this before this call, because he was making a new decision in his dating life, basically to not text somebody a whole bunch before meeting her, because they hadn't met. They met on a dating app and they're meeting tonight. And he wanted to not have a lot of text communication back and forth beforehand. And I actually think that makes good sense. But I was curious as to his reasons because it just, I've coached him for about a month now and it just raised an eyebrow. And it turns out what he was trying to do was not replicate errors of the past, right? He was thinking about a past relationship or two where there was a lot of communication before he actually met the person. And then once they met, things changed. It was disappointing. It was like not a right fit, whatever the case may be. And so I think we often do that as humans. It's like, and especially lawyers, it's like we love case law and precedent, right? So we like to look in our past as a way to predict our future and try and like duck and dodge mistakes that we think we made in the past that created the past. And the tricky sort of nuance to all of this is that remember that accountability and responsibility piece, we are always creating in our lives that which we are thinking about, right? So while we have created the past, we created the past because of thoughts that we were having before that past happened that we created. If we keep thinking about the past, we will keep creating that in the future. It's just how the brain works. And especially lawyers, like we love evidence, right? So if we decide dating is hard or dangerous or scary, or it's really easy to get hurt, or it's more likely that I'm going to get hurt than it is I'm going to find my person, we will go out into the world and collect proof that that's true. Versus if we really do the work on understanding why the past relationship didn't work, processing the pain, right? So much of the confusion around coaching is like, think positive and affirmations, but it's like, there's pain, right? Like dating is painful sometimes when you love somebody and it doesn't work out. And even if you're the one who said this isn't working, right? Like when there's love and love is lost, it is painful, right? It's like we have kids, we have pets, we have loved ones. And when we lose the ones we love, it hurts, but we don't not get pets. We don't not have children. We don't not engage with our grandparents or family members out of fear of the pain of loss, right? So it's all about just processing the pain of the past relationship, getting clear again on why that relationship ended and what was going on in our brains that created the relationship failure, even if it's not necessarily a failure on our part, just understanding where our brains were at when the relationship ended so that we can move through the clean pain of missing somebody that we loved so that we can step back out into the world and find somebody who is a better fit for us, believing that there's a better fit for us out there instead of believing everyone's a jerk, right? Which I think is what some of us without this work tend to like go back into dating being like, I'm going to put on a smiley face, but really I'm sitting here drinking my wine, believing that you're going to be a jerk, right? So it's like just getting, working on those kinks to make sure that we're not sort of gritting our teeth through the moving forward process.
So are you saying it's more like a self-fulfilling prophecy? If you come in there saying, hey, this person's going to be a jerk, well, then they're going to turn out into being a jerk because you're already kind of putting that out into the environment that that's what your expectations are.
For sure. And I think, when we think everyone is a jerk, we're just busy trying to avoid whatever it is that happened in our past. And we're not even paying attention to the ways in which the person in front of us may be like the wrong fit for other reasons. And so we force relationships believing that there's nothing better out there, or there's nothing that's a better fit for us out there. At least he's not a jerk, so I'll just settle for the fact that we're completely different in every other way. And then that perpetuates the idea that relationships are hard because we're in this relationship that's incompatible for us, because we're so focused on the jerk from the past that we're trying to avoid, that we miss the fact that okay, the guy in front of us might not be a jerk, but he's totally the wrong fit for us otherwise. And so it just perpetuates the belief, right? It's not like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like woo-woo voodoo dolls, we created this because we thought about it. It's really, we take action from this place of believing everyone's a jerk, so I've got to date this guy who's probably totally wrong for me, but at least he's not a jerk, right? Versus deciding everybody's not jerks and I'm going to hold out for the right person who is the right match for me and the right fit, believing that he's out there or she's out there or they're out there.
And how do you avoid that sort of settling, where you're afraid of, well, maybe Mr. or Ms. or whomever, right, that is out there? How do you avoid saying, well, what if they're not, and this is as good as it's going to get, and I better hunk down on this person, otherwise that I don't even have that and I'll just be alone? How do you avoid that phenomenon?
Yeah. So nobody likes this answer, but it involves being alone not being the worst thing ever, right? Because think about it from the other side, right? If you're on a date with someone who's I can't be alone, I need somebody in my life to make me happy, is it you? That's so unattractive. It's so much pressure. And so I think baseline with my clients, we're working on making our peace with being alone. Because it's not just something that we have to tolerate until we find the next person that we're dating. Kevin says alone forever. I love it. But it's not just about tolerating being alone until we meet the next person that we form a relationship with. It's about loving being alone, right? Even though we want the result of that ideal partner. But when we make our peace with being alone, we stop making decisions, as you just described, from fear. Right? From fear that we're never going to find what we're looking for. And instead we make decisions from again, what do I want? And why am I afraid of being single? What's wrong with me? What's going on with me that this seems like the worst possible thing? I think it's easier said than done, right? People are always talking about how they don't need a partner, they want a partner. But when you really ask the deep questions, when you really scratch beneath the surface, you find that people really do still believe that there must be something wrong with them, that they don't have that relationship yet. And with that sneaky thought in their brain, going out into the world and dating may continue to just create those relationships that feel like they're just a little bit off, right? That they're fine, but they're not exactly what you want. Because when you think there's something wrong with you that you've got to compensate for, you're much more likely to be in a relationship with somebody that's not your perfect fit, because you're well, at least I have someone, right? At least someone wants to date me. So I think it's really important to make your peace with being alone, which means making your peace with yourself and deciding that you are whole on your own, truly, but that you want this other person in your life versus I need this other person in my life in order to believe that I'm worthy of love.
Now, what about maybe cultural norms, right? That, well, you're in your 40s or you're in your late 30s and you're still single, and you have all of the sort of pressure maybe from family of when are you gonna get married, or when are you gonna have kids, or even in some cultural aspects, why did you get a divorce, right? I mean, how does that all factor in? Or do you have situations where sort of those pressures are pulling maybe some of your clients in a direction different than what they would want to go in?
Yeah, so I think it's really, again, sort of owning yourself and all that you want. I personally have a number of clients in their late 30s, early 40s that are single, and whether it's because they're divorced or it's because they are pursuing the exact right fit. Like for me, I've never been married. I'm 38, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But for years I did, right? I was like, oh my gosh, like everybody thinks it's crazy that I'm still single. I now look at it as like, I'm looking for something really specific, right? I'm looking for something really outstanding. And I would rather genuinely be on my own. And of course, that doesn't mean in isolation, although most of us are somewhat isolated right now. But like, it doesn't mean isolation, but I'd rather be single than be in the wrong relationship, right? And I think a lot of people would rather be in the wrong relationship than be single because they're so uncomfortable with who they are, right? And so I think it's always just a choice. And I think there's nothing wrong with choosing to be with somebody instead of facing the demons that exist within you by being by yourself. But the pressures of social norms and cultural expectations, and parents who want to meet grandparents or grandchildren, and just feeling like you want to keep up with your friends, right? That you want to be um, the couple at the event, or be able to talk with your friends about the pressures of having kids or whatever it is, and you feel left out. Like whatever those pressures are an invitation to look at what's not really sitting right within you and question, like, where is that coming from? And why do I feel, like I need to be this cookie cutter expectation blueprint in order to fit in or accept my own life, right? Like people are always going to have opinions, right? Just not just because you're single. Say you marry somebody and they think your husband's like a fool, right? It's like people are always going to have opinions about your life, but what do you think about your life? What do you think about your reasons? Like I for sure had my own thoughts about like, how can I coach people on relationships when I'm single? But it's like, I've been in so many relationships. I don't think they're failures. Like they concluded, but they concluded for the exact right reasons. And I think a lot of people spend time in relationships that aren't serving them and that they're just afraid of leaving for whatever reasons. I have the thought about myself and my single clients who are single into their 30s and 40s that we're doing this exactly right because we're not settling for the thing that doesn't fully satisfy us. So, the societal pressures and things that people say, we always have the option to think about it differently because we are the ones that know the truth about our lives better than anybody else.
Do you have clients, I guess, who are in maybe, let's say, toxic relationships and are looking for kind of advice or guidance to kind of how to transition out of that relationship? Or I don't know if it's to try to fix the relationship, but what advice can you offer if that's come up in terms of exactly what we were just talking about before?
Yeah. So a toxic relationship is just your opinion of the relationship, right? One person's toxic relationship is another person's totally normal, every week or every day arguments, right? So toxic relationships, just like when you should be married or when you should get divorced or not get divorced or whatever the should sentence is, toxic relationship is just as much an opinion. But I will say that I think for folks who are in relationships that they believe are toxic, it's like, well, why are you in a relationship that you think is toxic? And it really just comes down to what's the result that you want? Like, do you want to exit the relationship and start over? And if so, why aren't you? Is it because you're scared? What are you scared of? Right? Are you scared of that thing that we talked about before, that nobody else is out there, or that you won't find anything better, or what you're looking for doesn't exist, so you should just settle for this? Or are you in a toxic relationship that you think is toxic because of the way that you're showing up in it? And what can you do to show up differently to take the toxic out of your relationship instead of taking the relationship out of your life, right? So it's like we always have choices to make. We always have the option to set a boundary and leave, or do the work on ourselves if we think there's a change that can be made. Where it gets tricky is when you show up and you're in a toxic relationship and you want me to coach you on changing someone else, because that's basically impossible. For sure, when my clients shift their behavior, their partners almost always show up differently. right? And for the better. But that's never what we're motivated by, because when we're motivated by somebody else doing something different or saying something different, it's an exercise in frustration, because we cannot, I don't know if this is news to you guys or not, we actually can't control other people. We try, we really like to think we can. And for sure, I encourage my clients to communicate with their partners and tell their partners what they want, what they don't want, what they're looking for, what they're not looking for. Like, that's all important information. But at the end of the day, like, we can't make our partners do anything that they don't want to do, right? Or make them stop doing anything that they do want to do. So we just always have to be the final decision makers in our lives. Are we good with this or not? And if we want to be good with it, but we're not good with it, how do we get there, right? And that's the work that I do with my clients, toxic relationships or whatever the problem is in their relationship.
And you mentioned you can't control anyone. Have you ever had like couples sort of coming to you for coaching together, or?
Mm-mm. I only coach one-on-one because it really is like a situation where it's just so much to manage the thoughts of one person, let alone the thoughts of two people. I think it would be great if two partners were each getting coached themselves and then brought the fruits of their coaching to the relationship. Like, that's, to me, just like, oh my God, it can't get better than that. But coaching couples, I know counselors do it and therapists do it, but I've not heard of a coach that coaches couples, because I think it's just really important, much like the attorney-client relationship, to be the advocate and the person and the holder of emotional space for one client at a time. It just, I think, makes things, I actually wouldn't even coach like a husband and wife separately, because I'm coaching my client to their results. And sometimes I can imagine where the ideal result for one member of the relationship, one partner in the relationship, is to leave, and for the other it's to stay, right? So it's like, to coach both of them would just, I think, be a conflict of interest, for sure. So yeah, no couples, but yeah, one-on-one coaching only.
Now, what about those who kind of can't, we were talking about the past, but they're always comparing their current relationship or partner to someone from the past, and whether they, they measure up, or maybe they doubt the decisions they made, or they want something a little bit differently. And again, you mentioned you can't really control the other person, but how do they kind of let go of, maybe the people from the past there, or maybe it was the mistakes they may have made in the past, and concentrate on the person in front of you?
Yeah, I think that's the work, particularly for lawyers who want so much to rely on things that have happened, with, and apply that onto the future. And what I would say is that we're all different, right? And you can see that just in having an experience and telling somebody about it, and they have one reaction, and you have the same experience and you tell someone else and they have a totally different reaction. So we all are just unique and different and unusual and crazy and sane and happy and sad and all the different things at the same time. And so we're all going to respond to different situations differently. And just because one partner in your past did things one way, it does not mean, and even if they have things in common with your new partner, right? Even if both people are lawyers, or both people like sports, or both people, are Aries, like whatever it is, it's like you get to decide consciously that people are unique, and that just because one person showed up one way in your past does not mean that you're going to have that same experience going forward. I also think that comes with a grain of practical reality, right? And if you're seeing patterns and noticing that like you keep choosing the same kind of unavailable person, I think that's definitely a moment to pause and ask yourself, like, why am I pursuing time and time again unavailable people, which is something that has come up in a couple of my clients' work. But I think really being objective and assessing it, not from he's unavailable or she's unavailable, just like the past person, but instead being like, here right in front of me is why they're unavailable, and evaluating it de novo, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? Instead of being like, this is why this concerns me, because it reminds me of this thing that happened in my past. Like if you took that past example out, would you still think what the person in front of you is doing is evidence of them being unavailable? Or are you just coming to that conclusion because you're stuck in your past?
Now, what advantage do you think, with your legal background, how does that play a role in your life coaching, and how do you draw upon that experience? I mean, obviously for clients that may be practicing law, you may have some connection there, but what about just generally, how have you found that's been helpful to you in your new career here?
Mhm. I think mostly just because I understand the lawyer brain's instinct to, and really just any analytical mind. If you're an overthinker, whether you're a lawyer or an accountant or a veterinarian, like whatever you do, if you're somebody who overthinks, like when I coach people, I can see them. Okay, well, we've resolved this issue, and they want to jump to the next thing, or we've answered that like this behavior isn't like your ex, doesn't prove that he's unavailable, and they're like, okay, but this other thing. And it's like, I think because I understand how the brain just naturally wants to jump to the next thing and go like, here's proof of why it's like this. Here's more, here's more, here's more. For sure, Roxana, I'm an overthinker too. I get it. It's something that stays with us, but we can learn how to manage it for sure. But when we are doing that, I think like we get great awareness around what our brain's patterns are. And I think as lawyers, that's something that we're sort of trained to do, right? Like we're trained to think through and raise every objection and raise every problem and like shoot down every argument and prepare opposing counsel's case better than our own. And so I can anticipate my clients' brains like going the next step before they even get there, and coach them out of the sort of head spin that keeps you feeling like you have no control over all the overthinking. So I think that definitely helps. I also think just the fiduciary piece of it, the part where you're sitting with somebody and just listening and holding the space for them and problem solving and trying to get them what they want. I think having done that in legal practice for so long, I'm comfortable being in that sort of advisor, authoritative position where I'm like, trust me, like I've been doing this work a long time. I've studied it really hard. I have done and walked the walk myself. I'm going to tell you what to do here, and I'm going to tell you what to do based on your thinking and show you the way. But you're going to have to trust me because it's uncomfortable. And if it were comfortable and easy, you'd already be doing it and you wouldn't have called me. So we're going to do the things, and it's going to be me telling you this is why you need to do it. And I'm going to need you to trust me that I know best. And that I think is a skill set that came pretty easily for me as a coach because I had done that as an attorney for so long.
So what advice do you have for the overthinkers about, overthinking about getting back out there, or overthinking the relationship, or overthinking all the things that are going on in the relationship? What advice could you offer for them?
I would say ask yourself what the facts are. Like our brains love stories. I don't know if you guys have watched Brene Brown's presentation on vulnerability and courage. I think that's what it is on Netflix. She talks in that talk about her TED talk on vulnerability, but I'm talking about the Netflix one. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long. And she talks about how our brains love stories, right? We don't just see things in front of us and go like, oh, he said he's not sure if he wants to have kids, right? Like we hear that and we go like, he's not sure about me. He's not sure about our future. He doesn't know what he wants. He's probably unavailable. How can he not know? Is it because he doesn't love me? Like we have to fit it into this schema instead of just being like, he doesn't know if he wants kids. Like we don't just absorb that objectively, right? We make it into a story. And so I think with overthinking, the best tool I can sort of offer as a takeaway from, a very oversimplified explanation of what I work on with clients for 6 months is like, really ask yourself, your lawyers or paralegals or legal experts, so you know how to do this. You have the skills already, I promise you. Write down on a piece of paper, like what the thing is that happened that's making you feel terrible, right? Like just write down like, he said this. Quotes from other people are the best because it's like nobody could prove it didn't happen, right? Like we're forgetting the rules about hearsay a little bit, but like it's objectively true that like the words came out of this person's mouth, right? He said he's not sure if he wants to have kids, right? And you feel like you got punched in the gut. And so what are all of the reasons why? And when you write down all of the reasons why, Roxana, you'll see all of your thoughts. And that's just your brain's story. Your brain is just writing a story about what it means. Oh my God, it's happening to me again. Another guy that can't commit, another guy that doesn't know what he wants. Why does this always happen to me? It's so much harder for me than it is for other people, right? All of that stuff, I want you to hold space for yourself. Love yourself for having a little brain freak out. There's nothing wrong with you that you overthink. Overthinking isn't a problem. Probably makes you a really good legal professional. So without judging yourself, I want you to just write down the quote and write down everything that makes you feel like you got punched in the gut. Those are your thoughts, right? See that they're optional. See that they're choices that you're making around a neutral statement. And from there, like that's just step one out of many in managing overthinking. But you just, I think when you can see all the stories you write based on one sentence, it shows you, okay, this is my brain, right? This is just something that my brain is doing. I have the choice to like just say, he said what he said. Let's find out more. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much, Rachel.
No problem.
All right, so thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us here today. I certainly appreciated you taking the time and talking to us about relationships there. The hour just flew right on by there. But perhaps do you have any final words of advice for those who may, or some people may have been too shy there to ask a question about kind of how can you better improve maybe yourself there when you're with your relationships, so you can have a better understanding of what's going on and having that awareness, and certainly taking the steps to reach out to someone like you is maybe a good first step in terms of looking at those situations. So if anyone does want to reach out to you or take you on as a life coach, how can they do so, and how can you be contacted? And thank you once again for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me and for asking such great questions. You guys have been awesome. I put in the chat my website, which is rachelcollcoaching.com, and also my email address, which is rachelelizabethcole@gmail.com. I connected with John on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with any of you on LinkedIn as well. I post there basically daily about different relationship issues and experiences that I'm having, experiences that my clients are having. So it's a lot of fun. And this stuff just doesn't, I guess my final tip would be like, you don't need to be in like the darkest of dark places to reach out for a coach. You can absolutely just want to take your life from a B+ to an A+, right? Like it can be just a desire for things to be great, not that like you have to be super in it and miserable in order to justify reaching out to a coach. The other thing I would also offer is it's not like hard work in the sense that it's like heavy and painful and we're going to dig up a bunch of painful stuff from your past. Like coaching is awesome. It is fun. We laugh, we joke, we, make fun of ourselves and each other. And in the process, we figure out like where we can laugh at life and really find humor and lessons and opportunities, and where we really do have pain points that we want to work on so that we can shift a little bit and think of things in a slightly different way. So if you have questions and you're curious, reach out to me and I'm happy to hop on a consult with anybody who wants to learn more about coaching with me.
Perfect. So thank you so much again, Rachel. I just want to wish you all the best there in your career there. And I think thank you again for taking the time and assisting my students here. And I hope your clients, sounds like they're getting a lot of great advice from you. So I'm hoping that you're able to help guide them on whatever part in their life journey that they need the help with.
Thank you. I hope you guys all have a great weekend and good luck with your studies. And yeah, I'll come say hi if I'm ever up in Canada.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It was very inspiring.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Thank you for that feedback. And yeah, I'm wishing you all love and all the best.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, guys.